This next session is titled How to Balance Your Marketing Budget to Get the Most Good, and it's presented by you, Mr. Bates. Chris is the CEO of Agora Eversole Marketing Agency. Agora Eversole has focused for 10 years on many industry verticals. Banking and healthcare have become their primary service specialties. Chris and his team deliver goal-focused marketing through partnerships with their clients, providing services in marketing, design, consulting, digital marketing, SEO, digital advertising, etc., web design, and social media management. Chris, we're so happy to have you here again with us today, and take it away, please, sir.
Great, you got it. Thanks a lot, and very much appreciated. Excited about being with you guys. I think continuing to work here on a continuation of what we did yesterday and getting into more specifics about budget balance and budget planning. This is one of the most ambiguous, difficult discussions, I think, because answers are kind of all over the map. What is my C-suite directing? What is our board giving us for share of budget? Those kind of things. So I think, Chris and all of you, what we're going to cover today is going to give you hopefully a little bit of meat around the bone to utilize regardless of your number of branches, asset size, all of that. Much like our discussion yesterday, this presentation and discussion, I think, is going to be really applicable to everybody that's on the webinar with us today. So first of all, thanks for joining us. Is everyone seeing my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Yep, great. I pulled the wrong trigger yesterday morning, so I'm on it. I'm on it today, guys. All right, so let's dive into this and look at, pardon me, what is your budget balance? And realizing that every community bank has its own set of struggles, challenges. Also, the qualifications as we look into 2023 is what level of recession challenges are we going to have? We know we're in an increasing interest rate environment. Lots of different factors that are going to fall into this. So I think it's all the more important that as some belts are being tightened, that we really are intentional about our budget balance. What we have to start with is really framing up, first of all, the key questions. So before we get into divisibility of numbers and exactly what that is, I think it's so important to answer key questions about who we are and our why we're doing this across multiple frameworks. So what is your marketing superpower? I covered this a bit yesterday, but if you're not able to very quickly in kind of the elevator speech response answer, what this is, again, community depth or, your commercial banks, so small businesses, or whether it's about geography, whether it's about personality of your bank, whether it's about scope, whatever your specialization may be, that's an extremely important question to answer first, because it gives you the key element of what it is that you're going to talk about and how you're going to talk about it, therefore how you spend your budget, okay? So, and then obviously looking at what tactics have worked. Are you able to measure ROI? Certainly we are on the digital spectrum far more than the traditional spectrum. So, what is it that works? What is it that's brought conversions, engagement? And what is it that's speaking to your key audiences? And as you're doing that, that's why I asked the next question around your messaging is what is it? If your framework is simply we're your community bank, I don't know that messaging in generic level of messaging is really speaking to your key audiences. So I think as we consider here how you want to spend your dollars and which platforms and the total level of spend, I think it's so important that you ascertain what your messaging is, so that is that more on a branding scope? So is outdoor and non-specific CTA, call to action measurements, going to be more of the pathway for you this year? Or is it more specific about pushing deposit products around a specific set of goals? And what's that messaging? So I think you really have to answer those questions before you go too far with kind of throwing dollars at different platforms on your budget. And then again, determining your targeting, who it is, and creating a picture of who are your audiences is really going to help you so much with this allocation and determining that. So I wanted to set this framework for everyone and encourage you. And Nicole, I think following this presentation, you'll be sharing the PDF of this with everyone. Is to you and your team ascertain the answer to these questions before you go allocating dollars, and it's really important. Obviously, the other big part of this we spent time on the webinar about is your marketing strategic plan, and I'm going to assume that you've got that in place, and remind you that if you don't, we can certainly help you with that. So we showed you this yesterday, and again, I wanted to, as we get the boat off the shore with our discussion today, and you're looking at allocation of dollars, it's really these different categories and your expenditures. So we have the big picture questions, and then we have the specific allocations per category. So I'm not going to spend time rehashing the specifics around each of these, and can refer us back to yesterday's webinar and presentation. But it's good to categorize these as you look at your budget and allocations by percentage. And we're going to dive into some specific examples in just a moment, but I wanted to throw this as a helpful category break apart, if you will, for your spend categories. So let's look a little bit at what others in the industry are saying. So others that are like us, that are on the webinar this morning, and kind of a good way to begin discussing what percentages do I need to be requesting for the coming year, and all of those things that folks as marketing directors or head of a marketing team are asking. So this was one that involved about 50 or 60 folks, and if you're not involved in the ABA Marketing Network, I would certainly strongly encourage this. But this came out of an informal poll, and the bottom line was ranges were from 2 to 5% of annual revenues. Now, we're going to look in a few slides later about percentage of asset value, and that's a little bit different way to approach it. But when you're looking at annual revenue percentage, this makes a lot of sense for a general guideline, I think, for where you should be falling. A lot of this has to do, again, with your bank strategic plan. Are you in growth mode? Are there new products and services? Are you shifting your core system to have more tech offerings? Whatever the case may be, or are you in a brand growth, a little bit more of a quiet approach and not pushing new products and services. So as you look at your percentage of annual revenue, I think what range you fall in has a good bit to do with that. So what I wanted to do a little bit different than yesterday is pause this for just a moment. And Nicole, you might be able to help with this, but I wanted to ask everyone to jump in the chat for a moment. And if you have your percentage, say that you did for 2021 or 2022, or what your percentage of annual revenue may be for 2023, everyone jump in the chat and give us a ballpark number of either what that is or what you wish that it could be. And I think that would be a good part of our discussion if we can get some of those, please. Mm-hmm. As an association, Chris, coming in on the lower end of that is a kind of an expected piece here too. So some of you may be moving to your keyboards, et cetera. So go ahead and put those in, and we'll discuss this a little further as we go forward. One of the interesting things that came out of this, another 2%, thank you there, Mandy, was the inclusion of sponsorships and donations in your overall. And the vast majority of the 60 plus community banks that we work with, this still falls under the same hat. And that hat is entirely responsible for so many things under the community engagement, and that sponsorships and donations are really a part of that. So let's look at that for a moment and see what it is that we consider community engagement, because if that's part of your helm and responsibility and budget, which we'll assume that it is for just a moment, what are some of the typical makeups of that? And I love that community banks are able to sink their teeth in and promote community relationships at a level that regional and national banks are not able to. We're all aware that that's one of our major differentiators. So things like school sponsorships, education involvement, obviously these are a lot of things that play out well on social media, but become a part of your brand story and probably a part of that superpower, identification as to who it is that you are and what that's around. So education involvement, and yes, that can be in schools, but that can also be community education and fraud alerts and prevention and those types of things, and different ways to march that out. For charitable involvement, one of the things that we so strongly encourage with our clients is that marketing is an opportunity to lift up your community. It is an opportunity to lift up charities and not necessarily make it about you, your brand, those types of things, but to make it about what that mission or ministry may be about. And you have huge huge opportunities around that. We're all involved in community events, and in more recent time have been able to get back out and to engage in our communities, and how incredibly important that is. So, but that takes allocation of dollars. That takes a certain percentage of your budget. Health initiatives. So do you have things going on at your branches? Or are you out in communities participating and sponsoring health fairs, having blood drives at branch locations, those types of things? So as you look at your overall marketing spend, being deliberate about these community engagement sponsorships needs to be an important part of that. And then we'll kind of jump over into some of the more specific allocation looks beyond those engagements with your community. So this was a particularly interesting one that I think reinforces some of what we're talking about. And you guys that answered in the chat that you're in the 2% range might want to really consider some of what this looks like from a broader industry perspective. And this one fell right in the middle of a lot of the research, and my team and I were doing this. So across healthcare and manufacturing and lots of other retail is obviously a high end percentage on this spectrum as well, for percentage of revenue on marketing. But banking and financial and insurance services being 4.3% on an annual average across 2021 was a really interesting figure to me. And more around that 4% range is a lot of where we're seeing our more aggressively moving bank clients in their overall marketing spend. So that's another piece and another good one to share with you. This is a particularly valuable one, even though this is a top spenders, and kind of shifting from looking at annual revenue to looking at asset size, and maybe where is it that you fall in this as a percentage of asset size. So for overall healthy growth, okay, at a 0.10% of asset size and above, it is a really healthy and or aggressive level of marketing spend in this. And this is as you're asking for more money every year, and I'm going to assume everybody on the call is ideally looking for an increasing annual marketing spend year over year. These may be some good numbers for you to share as well. But decreasing from that, instead of investing a 0.07% range in your current size, think about it as a percentage of asset size, and what it is that you're doing in comparison to other community banks in order to continue to be effective and impactful in what it is that you're doing across your marketing spend. Okay. I'm going to pause for just a second and check the chat again. Any other questions at this point about the asset size, percentage allocation, and/or comparison to annual revenue?
Chris, on this, I see that's top 10 spenders. Do you know what, and so that's obviously not an average, but those are above that 0.10%. Do you know where the average would be in that mix, or?
Yeah, it's actually around that 0.06, 0.07, Chris.
Okay.
Is the majority of where we see it. And the juicy part of this data that we're looking at is the vast majority of our clients anyway kind of fall in the 200 million to 700 million range. And I know a good number of the folks that are on with us today, fall in that asset size range as well, Chris. So yeah, 0.06, 0.07 is where we're seeing a lot.
I think that's a good visual right there as well. You can see asset size and that ratio to kind of really gauge where our institution should be. So,
well, and Chris, the other piece of that as well is, again, initially ascertaining your superpower, your messaging, and all of that, and then rolling in with your strategic plan is what level of aggressiveness does your bank need to be? Are you in a growth mode? Are there new branch locations, or what's your strategy around increasing share of wallet and communication with your current customer base versus increasing market share, in your local areas around your branch locations, and how hard are you pushing in that direction? It's certainly more expensive to find new customers than it is to increase share of wallet to grow your revenues. Yep. So I think as we answer this about these percentage ranges related either to annual revenue or asset size, that's why that consideration, I think, Chris, needs to come first.
Gotcha.
Yep. Okay, super. All right. So let's look here at another trend, and I guess because we are still finishing out 2022, it was some of the typical resources that we use, Financial Brand, which I know a lot of you are very familiar with, and some of the statistical range data that we usually find. It was a little difficult for us to find something more current. But to me, it was very interesting in looking at a significant growth in, national spend trend from 2020 to 2021. Maybe some of this has to do with getting a bit more aggressive again as the pandemic continued to move forward. But I think as we looked at prior years, even in 18 and 19, this was still a continuing trend for overall spend amounts. So it's going to be really, really interesting for us to all compare 2021, 2022, and going into the coming year, again, with that increasing interest rate environment and all the other factors that we'll be going into. So again, we're looking at big picture percentages. And what we're going to move into here in just a couple of minutes is more specific allocation by marketing strategy and platform. But wanted to share some of this information with you about overall aggressiveness and amount of spend. Okay. All right. So let's switch over and look at budget allocation here. And this is almost entirely from a digital marketing spectrum. I did share with you guys that were on yesterday on our marketing strategic planning webinar that digital ad spend, not in the community banking spectrum, but overall nationally over the last 3 years is on an average 12.2% increase year over year. So that's a big jump in digital advertising, okay? Whereas traditional marketing spend over the last 3 years is on a 7% annual decrease. Now, at some point, that's got to kind of level off. And those of you that have heard me speak before know that even though our agency is primarily a digital agency, we advocate strongly for continuing your local presence as a community bank and your brand. And that very often needs to and should include traditional marketing tactics, and spend. And that obviously includes, referring to our earlier slide, sponsorships and community involvement. But this is really interesting to me how we see that social advertising and paid search advertising, which are two of the most targeted ways for us to reach specific audiences, are consistently at the top end of budget allocation per platform, okay, and across channels. Now, guys, I've been at this and been an agency owner for 13 years, been working with community banks for an awfully long time, and I'm gonna give a little confession here. I was blown away and surprised at this number that email marketing was not only the highest budget allocation, but fell on that end on the spend spectrum, because we did some other research outside of Gartner and looked at that, and this was a consistent budget allocation. So that may be something that you guys are marching out. We are big proponents and advocates and do a lot of design and implementation for our clients for email marketing. But that was at the high end of the budget allocation, to me was quite interesting. Some of that may have to do with the expense of that communication through core providers and other platforms, that type of thing. So, and there may even be some labor costs involved in that. But again, what we see here is higher spend for more targeted strategies and what that's around. So that's speaking to our audiences, because we all know that social media advertising, social media in general, is pay to play, right? We can have all this great content on our Facebook, Instagram, other platforms, and if we're not allocating spend dollars around that communication spectrum and targeting that within compliance, then our level of engagement and conversions and shares and all the measurables within the social media spectrum are not going to be where we want them to be. I think the good news is that doesn't take massive amounts of dollars. We have, for example, I looked over the course of this year at some of our community bank clients that are around the 500 million in asset and higher, at our average monthly recommended spend on social media advertising. And depending on your area, whether you're rural or urban, and lots of different factors to consider like that, we're spending anywhere from $250 to $500 per month can be an effective social media advertising budget. Now, again, if you're in aggressive growth, if you're leaning heavy on your social media, then your advertising dollars may be more than that. But the point is, that doesn't have to be a massive expenditure. So it's a great opportunity and way to go there. And the same thing for SEM, PPC, pay click in your search advertising, okay? If you're not backing that up with SEO and organic, that should be a significant part of your budget spend, As we covered in the webinar yesterday, that's like building a human reputation. It takes time. It's not overnight. A lot of digital advertising placement can be up and running within a matter of days and can be shortly impactful, whereas SEO and organic takes time, yet it builds momentum over time. So it's really important that we consider those things as a good mix of your marketing spend in what it is that you're doing. Targeted audio and visual, and obviously, again, these digital spectrum ones are increasing both in percentage and amount of spend year over year. So this will be interesting for you guys to take your spend levels in your budget and maybe do some comparison too. All right. So again, let's get a couple of you jump into the chat and give us your top spend categories. And I'd be very interested in seeing with our group that's here today, what that is. Is it digital advertising? Is it social spend? Is it traditional? Whatever the case may be. So if we could get a couple of you guys jump in the chat and give us where you see your top spend priorities, that would be great. And I'm looking down the list of participants here. I'll start calling people out. Yep, great. Thanks, Julie. Yep. And I think it's fitting around certain key markets. Again, obviously where this is, but it's interesting to you, Julie, and to others, where it is that your spend is moving as well, and is that less in traditional and more in digital. So yeah, Mandy, you had responded about your percentage earlier as well, but it is interesting that sponsorships is a top priority for you guys, and again, not surprising, and that's a lot of why I put that at the beginning of this presentation here, because it's such an important part of your mix and your marketing expenditure. Yep. Yep. Yeah, good, Julie. A lot of sponsorships as well. Yep. Yeah, Jennifer, if Facebook and on the social media spectrum is still one of the majority, priority spend areas that you guys have, I'm sure you're getting good and measurable ROI from your engagement in that, and that has to build around your content strategy and lots of that as well. Yeah, it is interesting that several of you mentioned radio, and one of the things that we've seen with a number of our clients is moving some of that radio over into digital streaming, Spotify, Pandora, iHeart, those types of things, so that it's digital marketing yet still carrying those audio messages out there as a balanced part of that radio spend. So that's just a little tidbit there that we've seen a number of our clients moving to. Yep. Sponsorships, outdoor. Great. Thank you, Sandra.
Chris, on that topic of, digital media, digital radio, can you geofence on like iHeartRadio and Pandora and things like that?
About 1,000%, yes.
Okay.
We've got one of our clients that wanted to, in South Louisiana, for example, wanted to target the Highway 90 corridor. Okay. And that was based on some discussion around some of their local competition. And it ran past 3 of their 4 branches. And anyway, there was a lot of strategy that went into that as well, Chris, but for sure that can be geographically targeted and measured. Yeah. So that's the beauty of that maybe some of the traditional radio is not able to necessarily do and measure. The difference between digital streaming spend and other digital advertising that's geo-fenced and geo-targeted is that you can't click on your radio as you're riding down the road. So that's not measurable. So we've looked at some additional ways to be able to measure ROI. But yes, Chris, that's the beauty of being able to geographically target that. Yep. Great question. Yep. Okay, wonderful. I'm so glad that we included sponsorships and community involvement as part of this discussion, since several of you have said that that's a significant part of your marketing spend that falls under your spectrum. So great, good stuff. Thanks, guys. All right, so looking at this, what we put together here was again a chronological process and a priority process for determining your marketing spend. Okay, and again, if you're not starting that with your strategic planning process and everything that's involved in that, you need to back up and do that first. Determining those framework answers to those questions that we asked around your messaging, your targeting. What is it that your superpower is? What are you promoting? If it's just the fact that you're a community bank, then it might need to be about more than that or more specifics than that, best you can. And then looking at your budget allocation by category, platform, all of that. And then the last piece that I wanted to encourage, as I had mentioned, ABA, and certainly you're all participating today with ICBA New Mexico and realizing the value of this community. And again, we work with enough community banks across a broad enough geographic area, 15 states, that in short, guys, I see the ones that are isolated versus the ones that are really engaged through their state banking associations or other private groups that they're doing and participatory, and it helps so much with that sense of community. So I want to encourage all of you to do that as well. So the bottom line from this is you can go about this intentional marketing blend of your spend process, or you can kind of do like this guy and just say, well, this is the way we've always done it. And that may not be necessarily the best approach. And if some of the reasons that your C-suite or your board is allocating marketing spend dollars because this is how we've always done it, I might encourage you to utilize some of the data and information that we've covered today to be able to argue for a larger spend, or at bare minimum to be able to maintain your current spend. So guys, this can be a difficult and ambiguous area to get a lot of detailed information about that's applicable to your work. And I hope some of this that we've provided with you today and some of this discussion and even seeing what others are doing as well and where their priorities are and the percentages both of annual revenue and of asset size are helpful to you. Just as I did yesterday, I want to extend myself and our agency without obligation as a resource to you, because honestly, there's so much more detail that we could have included in this that may or may not have been applicable to all the participants that are on today. But we're glad to pull this and give you more information about marketing spend if you are more rural focused or urban focused, or maybe you're a $2 billion bank instead of a 200 million in asset bank and have a different set of questions. So we're more than happy to engage with you and do that at any time. And please feel free to reach out to us for that. And Nicole, if I'm correct, I think you'll be sharing the presentation, which has our contact information on here with everybody that's on today.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, well, great. Any questions? Either throw in chat, or if anybody wants to unmute and throw in a question or two.
Chris, to kind of build on the budgeting thing, and hey, here's a couple questions I've jotted down through conversations that we've had in planning, etc. But you mentioned early on about some of our community banks have a marketing department of one person that wears many hats, and then some of our institutions may have the marketing department set up differently. In those conversations with leadership within the bank, do you have any advice or any direction to give to our marketing folks on a budget development, and what types of data should they have or would be helpful in having those discussions to try and grow marketing budgets within the institution?
Sure, Chris. I ended this discussion today with encouraging community and communication, with others, and even some of the data from this presentation today, hopefully can provide some ammo, Chris, to some of ours to say, hey, we're at 2%, and yet we want growth, which really puts us at the bottom end of, a percentage of annual revenue, which says comparative to other community banks, we're not being very aggressive. So, I think data is important ammunition, Chris, for one thing. Um, I, I will say this. We're putting together some of our 2023 messaging for our community bank client base. And I think as we go into a time of whether it's recession or fear of recession, and whether it's tightening belts, and there's so much shifting that's going on here, from deposit accounts to loans to, and then back to deposit account needs and those types of things, depending on your own bank strategy. It's really around, are we going to operate from a fear base? And as marketing people, everybody that's hearing my voice right now wants to argue correctly that marketing is not an expense; it's an investment in growth. And Chris, I think that's the key part of that discussion as well. Is again, the leadership for the bank is helping them to frame that. Is, are we going to recoil, and be fear based? Or, are we going to continue to invest in the growth of what it is that we're trying to do, whether that's in a specific product or service category, or whether that's the bank, as a whole. I can promise you that regional and national banks are not pulling back, and so as we operate as community banks, it's really important that we continue to do that and have that mindset. And the last piece of it, Chris, is this. I am a huge proponent and advocate of opportunity. I started my digital marketing agency in 2009, okay, in the middle of a recession with this premise. While your competition is in fear and they're pulling back on their marketing budgets, to me, it's a perfect opportunity. Let's run. Let's outrun, and even being able to jump into the digital marketing spectrum and more quickly flex and move and bob and weave a little bit in marketing spend. What a great opportunity to outrun your competition while they're in fear and possibly trimming their marketing budgets. So those are the discussions that we've been having with our clients and the leadership for our clients. I was in Birmingham last week and sitting in on a board meeting with one of our most active and highly involved bank clients, and had exactly those discussions. And they understood the justification for that, and that marketing is not an expenditure, it's an investment.
Yeah. And it should be part of strategic planning within any institution, I would say.
Absolutely.
Well.
Yep.
I'll pause shortly here to see if anybody has any questions. I do have one more that I've jotted down. Well, Chris, one of the things that, and anytime we have a marketing professional or anybody in that realm, I tend to ask this question, looking more for guidance to our folks, because it gets brought up a lot when we do our planning here, and if it's not your expertise, I understand. But one of the questions or concerns that I hear from the marketing side of things is getting that buy-in from everybody in the institution, especially the front line. Understanding that they are a part of that marketing. They're the face of the institution a lot of times on the front end. And so, any advice for our folks?
Absolutely. The best tool for that is a marketing strategic plan, Chris. One of the suggestions I have for that is having two versions of it. So there's one version that you and the leadership of the bank pad that may have these budget allocation and spend numbers. It may have who's responsible for which parts and all of that. And then you may have a simplified version of that to share with frontline staff and CSRs and loan officers and all of these folks, that at least shares the outline of the marketing strategy so that they have input and they feel bought in, at least because it's shared with them, Chris. And, so that they're not surprised when someone walks into the bank or calls or submits an email, request through your website or something like that around whatever, this new product or service or whatever the case may be, because they didn't know that it was on radio, it was in your social media ads, and it was in your PPC campaign, that you were pushing their particular product or service. So one of the surefire ways to have your more frontline staff feel distanced and not bought in is to not inform them, right? And to me, the easiest way to do that is a simplified version of your marketing strategic plan. And hey, here's what we're focusing on in June, around HELOCs or whatever the case may be, that's part of your strategy, so that they're bought into that and understand the messaging and all of that. So I think the more informed they can be, the better, Chris. And that is the best ammunition that you have for a top to bottom buy-in internally.
Perfect. Well, good advice there. So any last questions before we wrap this session up?
Well, guys, I very much appreciate the time with you as we put this particular presentation together. It was definitely a concerted effort to try and give you some juicy information that translates well to what you're doing in your day-to-day activity, because again, Chris, to your point earlier, so many of you guys are standalone marketing directors, or you're wearing multiple hats, one of which is marketing, or even if it's you and a small team, don't always have all the resources and manpower that you'd love to have. So you guys are heroes. A lot of these bank boards that I visit with, I don't really think fully understand and comprehend the value of the marketing work that you guys do day in and day out. So kudos to you. I hope that you've had a great year, that as you go into 2023, you're maybe encouraged by that message that I shared a few minutes ago, that if your competition is withdrawing, then time to run past them, and to be encouraged by the opportunities abound in the coming time. And so I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to be with you today. Again, offer us and our more detailed resources to any of you anytime, and wish you all a Merry Christmas. So thanks a lot for the time today.
Chris, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you. And once again, we appreciate your support of our association and our New Mexico community bankers.